Question number 4, Grant Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. Does he agree with the Minister for Canterbury Earthquake Recovery that Treasury has an arrogant, bureaucratic attitude to Christchurch and that the report he released yesterday is utter tripe? If not, why not?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, to some extent, and I can understand the Minister's view. He has dealt with the expenditure of over $15 billion in what would be the most complicated set of decisions that any government or minister has had to make. Mr Speaker, Treasury measures these projects against a theoretically perfect yardstick, and of course in Christchurch almost no project has been able to follow the theoretically perfect yardstick. The Minister, of course, has been able to cut through a lot of bureaucratic process, make decisions and get things done, and that's why Christchurch is in such good shape.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Order. Supplementary question, Grant.
It's all about you, Jerry. Is Jerry Brownlee correct when he told Radio New Zealand that the Treasury, who prepare the government's budget, quote, did not appreciate the amount of money the government was spending in Christchurch?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I think that's probably right. There's parts of Treasury that do the accounting and parts of it do the project monitoring, and it's possible that the people who monitored the projects aren't aware quite how much money has been spent there. And of course you have to go to Christchurch to be aware how effectively it's been spent.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
In light of those two answers, why is he, as Minister of Finance, overseeing an agency that does reports that he has accepted a, quote, utter tripe, and that they don't actually understand how much money the government's spending in Christchurch? Why is he allowing those kind of reports to come out?
The question's been asked. The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the member needs to understand the context, which is the government issuing reports on... Well, we've issued reports on 409 projects costing $6.5 billion this year, and further detail on 38 projects, of which, with more complexity, of which the Christchurch project is just one. And we are bringing more transparency and accountability than has ever been seen to the expenditure of the government's capital budgets. And in that context, if the Treasury made one mistake, it would be that the red rating should not actually indicate the project is unachievable, because these projects are being achieved.
Question.
Supplementary question, Joanne Hayes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What reports has he received on the performance of the government's most complex investment projects?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, as I said, we've just released the first report managing government investment projects, an annual report. The $6.4 billion worth of projects will, over their lifetime, cost $74 billion. We also released the first 4-monthly major projects performance report, which includes our 38 most complex investment projects and the ratings of how they've been conducted up to June last year. As I said, the use of the term unachievable is not correct, because actually the half a dozen projects that had some red rating at some stage will all be achieved, particularly those in Christchurch.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Can he guarantee today that there will be no further slippage in the timeline for the delivery of the Convention Centre and Metro Sports Centre projects, one of the main concerns raised by the Treasury?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, as the Minister has said, timelines hadn't been set for those projects, which is one of the reasons, according to Treasury's perfect benchmark, that they were rated with some uncertainty. Both are now involved in detailed commercial discussions, and the member can be reassured that those projects will be completed and the funding is readily available for them.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Joanne Hayes.
Thank you. What steps has the government taken to improve transparency around the performance of the most complex of these projects?
Order. Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the reports that have been issued are a major step forward in transparency over the expenditure of billions of dollars, because this information has not been available previously to the government until recently, let alone to the public. And we expect that it will continue the pressure for improved performance in delivering projects across the public sector.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Isn't what's really happened here that the Treasury have said what most Cantabrians have known for some time, that the rebuild of Christchurch under his and Mr Brownlee's watch is a complete mess, and that the promises of the project will continue to be delayed and fail to deliver?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the member does suffer from the political problem of being completely Wellington-bound, and these statements make it evident. I invite the member to visit Christchurch,
Order. Less interjection, please. It was a political question that was asked. The Minister can answer it.
I invite the member to visit Christchurch, which is in the South Island.
Order. Now, I rose to my feet a minute ago. There was very loud interjection coming from two members particularly. I asked it to cease. It hasn't ceased at all. The question's been asked. The Minister has a right now to answer it. Members may not like the answer they're getting, but he still has a right to deliver it without the level of interjection that's coming from my left. If it happens again, I'll be asking a particular member to leave. Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, I invite the member to visit Christchurch, which is in the South Island, and the Minister will give him a free, lengthy briefing. And I also invite him to visit Reg, who was in the 5,000th State House repair, a very happy customer, one of 5,000 who have had their state houses all done up in Christchurch.
Question number 5. Order. Question number